good evening and welcome to today's class about the passive voice. Now, you are probably thinking, what is the relationship between James Bond and the passive voice? Well, when we talk about the passive voice in English, we always talk about the agent, no? El autor, no? The agent of the action, no? And the important thing to remember is the position, no? That agent has in the sentence, no? If it is the subject, no? In that case, if the agent is the subject, we need the active voice, no? For example, Cervantes wrote El Quijote. No? So Cervantes sits down and he actively writes the book. No? In the passive voice, no? We would use El Quijote was written by Cervantes. Now, Cervantes is still the agent, no? El autor, but he is no longer the subject, no? So sigue siendo el autor, pero ya no es el sujeto, ¿vale? So we are going to talk today about the passive voice, okay? So, to form the passive voice, in English, you need two things. You need the verb to be and the past participle. So, we use the verb to be in a suitable tense, and then we add the past participle to give specific meaning. Now, for example, it is made in Spain, well, the verb to be in the present simple, no, plus my past participle, made. My coat is being sent to the cleaners. Well, the verb to be, no, is in the present continuous, plus my past participle, sent. The window was broken by my brother. The verb to be is in the past simple, plus my past participle, broken. It will be repaired tomorrow, no? The verb to be in the future simple plus the past participle repaired, and it is going to be sold, no? So the verb to be in be going to plus infinitive, no? And my past participle is sold. Now, don't worry for the moment. These are just some examples, okay? Now, so how to make an active sentence passive? Well, you can often express the same idea in two ways, in the active or the passive. Now let's look at my example. I have an active sentence. Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. My passive, Romeo and Juliet, was written by Shakespeare. Now, can you see? Now in the active sentence, the focus is more on Shakespeare, because he's the subject of the sentence, no? And in the passive sentence, the focus is more on Romeo and Juliet, because Romeo and Juliet is the subject of the sentence, no? So Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare is the focus. Romeo and Juliet was written by Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet is the focus. Now, let's look at what happens to Shakespeare. Now, in my active sentence, now, Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. He's the subject. Now, in my passive sentence, Romeo and Juliet was written by Shakespeare. Well, here he is the agent, no, in the passive sentence. And to introduce the agent in the passive sentence, we use by, no, que viene a ser como por Shakespeare, no, by Shakespeare. No? Very good. And what happened to Romeo and Juliet? Well, if we look at the active sentence, no, Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. No, is the object, no, the direct object. If we look at the passive sentence, Romeo and Juliet was written by Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet is the subject, no? So in the active sentence, Romeo and Juliet is the object. In the passive sentence, Romeo and Juliet is the subject. Now, can you see the difference? Now, when do we use the passive voice? Well, we use the passive voice in English when the person or the thing responsible for doing the action, no, the agent, no, el autor, no, is unknown, desconocido. For example, someone stole my bike yesterday. Who? We don't know. When the agent is obvious, the police arrested the criminal this morning. Well, who usually arrests people? Usually the police, no? And number 3, when the agent is not important, no? Someone cleans my windows every year. So who? Well, it's not important information. Now, sometimes who or what causes an action is not important, not the agent, no? So it would be the subject, no? And we are more interested in what happens to the thing or to the person, no? So in the previous examples, no, the important information in the first sentence is about the bike, no? In the second sentence, about the criminal, the man, no? And in the third sentence, it's about the windows, no? And what has happened to them. Okay? So we can emphasize this by using the passive. So for example, my bike, important, it's the focus now, was stolen yesterday. The criminal, he is important, was arrested early this morning. And the windows are cleaned every year, no? So we can emphasize my bike, the criminal, and the windows by making it the subject, ¿no? Pero claro, es el sujeto del verbo, pero no realiza activamente esa acción. Por lo tanto, el verbo tiene que estar en voz pasiva. El verbo to be más el participio del pasado. ¿Vale? Now, the passive is more common in written English than spoken English, and it is often used in the following cases, ¿no? For reports of crimes or legal matters, ¿no? Para informes, ¿no? Sobre todo de crímenes o de asuntos legales, ¿no? Miramos el ejemplo. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Newspaper reports. Reportajes, ¿no? Periodísticos. 63 people were killed and 45 were injured in the accident. In scientific writing, 3 milliliters are added to the mixture. Announcements, flight IB to London is delayed by 2 hours. And notices, customers are requested not to smoke. Now, so these are some examples where in English we would use the passive voice, no? Because the important information, no, is perhaps not the person or the thing who does the action, ¿no? So aquí usaríamos quizás en inglés la voz pasiva, porque es más importante enfatizar otra información que no sea el agente, ¿vale? Very nice. Thanks for listening.